All right, what is going on, everyone? My name is Jonathan. I'm the host of the Aymin Audio podcast, and I am extremely excited today because we have Grant Parr with us. He's a mental performance coach, and I'm not even going to get into it. I want him to really discuss what he does. We have a fascinating show, though, coming, and so Grant, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, man. I'm stoked. I'm really excited to be on your show.
Thank you. Thank you. So, explain a little bit about your company, what you do, how you help people, and kind of the specific market that you're in.
Yeah. So my company is called Gameface Performance, and basically, as a mental performance coach, what I'm doing is I'm working with all levels of athletes and coaches. So I'm working with professional athletes, Olympians, collegiate, and high school athletes, even youth. But what I'm doing is basically putting in a process that allows them to whatever they're working on, whatever they need to tap into their toolbox, if you will, to help them make better decisions with their mind and their body. Basically aligning their thoughts and emotions together in the moment. And I'm also working with I call them corporate athletes. So I do some executive coaching. I also do work with corporations and sales organizations on providing mental skills training and leadership training.
Amazing. So I was actually going to ask you about a little bit of that because I was, going through the website in preparation for the show, and so many things I felt like were just so incredibly cross applicable.
Yeah.
Whether you're playing any sort of sport at a high level or whether you're, playing the sport of business, right?
Right.
What inspired you to get into this? How did you? Because this is a very, very creative and I think very needed service that you provide. What inspired you to get into it? Kind of where was your background?
It's literally a long story, but I'm going to give you the cliff notes. Basically, my background as an athlete, I played quarterback for 13 years, all the way up to college. I had a career-ending injury my junior year. I also, outside of that, I was in corporate America for 17 years. I was in sales and sales leadership. But what kind of brought me to being a mental performance coach and what motivated me was my career-ending injury, which I had a hip injury that literally lasted about 2 decades I had to deal with. I've had two hip replacements on the same hip. I've
Wow.
had to deal with a lot of identity issues, depression, confidence issues, and I had to deal with a lot of anger and frustration because I loved that sport so much and it gave me so much throughout my life. But I didn't get to make the choice to leave that sport. My body made the decision for me, and so I didn't deal with it right for a long time, and so it got me to a point after my second surgery when I finally got my life back. Because the first surgery actually left me handicapped for about 4 years. So I couldn't tie my shoes. I couldn't clip my toenails. There's a lot of things. My spine was turned in 3 spots because the way that I was overcompensating my walk. So I dealt with my story of adversity is pretty compelling, but I love it. I mean, I'm not going to be honest with you. I went through a lot of stuff, and but I love that I did, and I love that I came out on the other side so I can share the story. So after I got back, my second surgery, I started to realize I'm like, I need to do something different with my life. I need to get back to, I don't have to be the same Grant, right? I know I was the man back in the day and I wasn't the man for a long time, but I'm going to create a new man. And I'm going to reignite this warrior, this athlete, this competitor. And so I did. And so I did a lot of discovery and listened to Desmond Howard on a radio show on ESPN. He started talking about a sports psychologist. And I'm like, what is that? I needed one of those when I was playing football. So it was that night. I remember it. It was on a Thursday. I sat there and as soon as I listened to that interview, got home and I just got on the computer and learned a lot about the profession and the field. And then within 2 months, I was enrolled at JFK University and got my master's in sports psychology. And then been doing this for the last 4 or 5 years since then. So, and here I am.
Wow, that is incredible. I feel like many people may relate to that, and many people in my audience, when you have a career-ending injury like that, and so much of your persona and identity is wrapped up in
Yeah.
that, and then you have to make such a dramatic shift. That's really, really tough to deal with. So then, do you deal now with? Are you primarily focused on, and maybe this is just kind of goes in waves as your business happens, but are you focused on recovery and helping people get through similar issues from a mental perspective now, or are you more focused on helping people who are maybe not injured, taking their game to the next level?
So it's a great question. And when I got into this profession, like when I was going to school, that's why I was doing it. I was like, I'm going to help athletes that are injured during the season, or if they had a season-ending injury or a career-ending injury. I wanted to be the dude. I wanted them to know that I've been through it and I can actually help you get out of it, and gain back your confidence in your body. But as I started to go more into the educational piece of my development, I started to realize I'm like, there's so much more that I can do, at all levels. So, and even in the corporate world. So I started to expand myself and my offering. And so when I started to realize like what I wanted to do, it's pretty much I'm helping the athlete or the performer. So when I say performer, like anybody that's performing anything, a singer, a doctor, CEO. And what I'm doing is basically I'm either enhancing their mental game or addressing. So when I use that language, I mean, I'm not going to fix you. There's nothing broken about you. If you think you need to be fixed, I use the language as I address. I address what you need, and when we put a process in place that's going to provide a result. Or there's a lot of people that come to me, they're like, man, my mind is great. My game is great. I just want to make it even stronger. Then I'll enhance it. So that's kind of my mindset and how I go to market, if you will.
Gotcha. So either addressing or enhancing, depending on the need of the athlete or the performer. Okay, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, when I was looking at your site, something that struck me was, a number of different places you said things like the athlete, it's not enough for an athlete just to be super physically competent, but you have to have that mental edge. When you look at an athlete, is it pretty easy from the get-go for you now at this stage in your career to kind of say this guy or gal are going someplace, like, because you can tell that they have kind of that X factor that you have seen push them through, or is it not that clear from a mental perspective?
It's hard to answer that, because for this work to really like to actually flourish, or someone to flourish with this work, they need to be bought in. They need to literally do the work. And this work is no different from any other training. Like it's training. So there are times where I've worked with athletes, like you can tell, like they've got the physical tools, they're mature, their emotional intelligence is there. They're bright and they're asking great questions. And you can just tell right off the bat, all right, they're bought in, they want this. Now there's some that have the physical talents and they've just never done this work. So they're learning how do I actually change my behavior? How do I adopt these practices? So it takes a little bit of time for them to feel comfortable and to actually and start to buy in and believe in it. So it all kind of depends. But go ahead.
And sorry to interrupt here, but just a little bit of clarification. When you say work, are these mental push-ups that you're doing? Is there a physical and a mental component? Talk to me a little bit about what that work that you talked about meant.
Yeah, it's training, but you have to understand this type of training is it's consistency. You have to be consistent with it every day. And I'll get to a little bit of like what you would call a mental push-up, but it takes a lot of vulnerability. So you have to show up and be vulnerable. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable to do the mental push-up. So for you to have a relationship with breathing, right now you and I are breathing. But if I ask you 7, 10, 15 times a day to drop in, notice your breath for 2 or 3, maybe 5 seconds, and then get out of it, but you're doing that every day for 10 to 15 times, okay, that's easy. If you calculate the amount of seconds, it's not even a minute if you're doing it 15 times a day, right? But it's so easy to do and it's so hard to do. Now, when you're doing it, when you're actually like getting into that rhythm of breathing, meditating, visualization, self-talk, writing down your gratitude, writing down your mantras, and just being in the work, though, that's what you would call like maybe a mental push-up, because all that stuff, it might not feel like at first it's going to help you, but it's no different from when you go to the gym for the first time in the off season to do a squat. Are you going to see anything? Like you do a couple sets of squats. Are you going to see any gain after that one session of working out? Probably not. but maybe after 30 days you might. It's the same thing. So you just have to be consistent. You got to trust it and believe in it, because all this stuff that I teach is based off science. So it works.
I had the opportunity to interview someone named Ben Angel. He's an author and a biohacker, I guess is the term. And it was something that I got turned on to because I started realizing as I was running my own business, there's this huge mental component, and sometimes I just felt so clicked in and so on, and the words would flow and everything, all the clients would pick up and everything was going really well. And then some days it was just like this massive fog and this massive, like almost depression. And I'm not typically by nature a down sort of person. I'm usually very kind of up. So I was wondering, what's going on with this, but tell me, when you're looking at some of the athletes that you're working with, whether they are recovering from something or whether they are, looking to add that extra edge, do you feel like there's a significant component of their environment and let's just say specifically health, is something like diet or anything that really, really plays a difference? Or is a lot of this just kind of that self-talk that you were talking about?
Well, again, it varies on the person and what they're addressing. But I mean, when you talk about all these other elements that actually affect our mindset, like recovery, right? When we think about sleep and diet and meditation, even laughing, I mean, those things from a recovery standpoint will definitely allow someone to have a better mindset, but will allow them to position themselves to actually understand and click and buy into this work, right? Now, sometimes it can be an easy fix. Sometimes we're just focusing on a confidence. Now, again, when I say confidence, that might not be easy for some people, but the way I teach it, I know exactly how I can get somebody to actually feel more confident and act into their confidence. So it might just be a poignant thing. It might be like, I need to get them to they have a refocusing issue. Let's just focus on that. And maybe having these other things that connect to mindset, like recovery, meditation, all that. Maybe we don't have to necessarily do that, but I'm gonna definitely introduce it, because this work, if you truly want this work to work, you have to be present and you have to be where your feet are, and all that starts with your breath. So if we're dealing with refocusing issues, confidence issues, motivational issues, I'm gonna first get you in your breath. I mean, that's where we start. That's a starting line, is our breath.
I've heard there's, mouth breathing, nose breathing. Is there something specific? Like if listeners are looking for a tip on breath, and of course, without giving, it all away, is there a tip that you would kind of, a quick tip that people could just start with?
Yeah, the cool thing about breathing, and it's so there, and I love it. There's so many practitioners and experts have been really creative with all the different kinds of breathing. And I'll give you one that I think is pretty cool. But before I get into that, I would just encourage your listeners that before we start getting into certain kinds of breathing, notice your breath, like notice your rhythm. Just drop into how the air feels through your nose and how it comes out your mouth and how your body feels with that. Because I want you to get that feeling. Like sometimes people go, hey, I need to do a circle breath. Hey, I need to do a reset breath or a centering breath. Okay, cool. I want to teach you all that. But I want you first to know your breath, know your rhythm. Like, do you naturally like inhale for 2 or 3? And do you naturally exhale for 4 or 5? What is that? So I encourage your listeners to kind of just identify their breath. But one, I think, fun breath is actually the reset breath. It's where you're actually inhaling positivity and you're exhaling negativity. So whatever that positivity, like that positive image, person, whatever that thing that makes you feel really good, breathe that in. And then if whatever that negative emotion or negative thing that just happened, exhale that out of your body.
It's funny you're saying that, and then I'm, even just talking about breath, and I'm thinking like, oh man, how am I breathing? Like, am I taking shallow breaths? Am I taking deeper breaths? There's kind of a level of self-awareness that I think maybe we assume that we have, that we don't realize that we have until you do concentrate on some of these tiny little things. Have you seen that makes a huge difference in how people are socially as well, because when you're present, when you understand what you're giving off to the world, and there is a level of self-awareness, have you found, just kind of as a natural side effect, that people are more comfortable in social situations?
Oh yeah, 100%. Now, but here's the thing about breath. What actually fuels the breath is energy. So I believe if people are taking care of their energy, they're checking their frequency every day, or checking their frequency before they get into a social situation, whether if it's networking or in a meeting, a conference, workshop, if they're checking their energy, and there's certain things you can do to actually either check with it or enhance it, then you're getting present to the energy. Then you start getting present to your breath. So the energy and breath, when it's connected, yeah, you're going to see that in a social scene or a social environment. And to be honest with you, you're going to see people thrive. You're going to see people radiate. We as humans, we are programmed to be negative, but man, when we feel positivity, we go into it. And so, and that's my thing about not only my work, but as just a human, my energy is my offering. I know that my energy can be big sometimes, and it can be very, very reserved. But man, when I check it and I understand what my frequency is, man, it's like, you're going to feel it. And a lot of my athletes do feel that. They're like, Coach, do you ever not have all this energy? I'm like, sure. But I love what I do, and you guys actually enhance my energy. So man, I plug into that.
Mm-hmm. So I love that. I'm so fascinated by this, and uh, for a couple of reasons. So the company that I run is an event staffing company, right? It's all temporary staffing positions, so bartenders, servers, and the industry itself is plagued by a lack of high quality service. And it's because, as you can imagine, many people aren't really inspired and thrilled at the idea of, serving appetizers and beverages, as a full-time career. And so you get a lack of enthusiasm oftentimes for these positions, and you get folks that are really only there for, okay, how long do I have to be here? Clock in, clock out, and they're not there to serve, right? They're there just to get their money and get out. And so I walked into this industry about 5 years ago, realizing that there's got to be a change. There's got to be a way to do it. And what I quickly came to the conclusion is you had to rewire thinking. I mean, we were asking, as a business owner, I was asking for behavior modification from people. Yeah. And so what you're describing is perfect. And I want to dial into it a little bit more. So how do you handle someone who, whether they're an athlete or, an executive, how do you handle it when how do you incentivize the change? Because a lot of times maybe they don't see, like, okay, breath work. Come on, Grant. I got a lot, limited time here, and I'm breathing. Yeah, I'm breathing. I've been breathing since I was born, kind of thing. Talk to me about that. How do you kind of help rewire some of that, maybe even impatience and lack of understanding about the power of what you're doing?
Totally. Well, I have empathy for you because I spent 10 years in IT and accounting, finance, staffing. So I get it, right? So here's how I would present that we all hear the word mindset. We hear it all the time. And for me, my perspective of mindset is intention. When you set your intention for the day, for the morning, for the moment, and you connect it with your breath, this road unfolds. It's your guide. We hear this thing about staying in your lane. That's your lane. It's your intention. And if you are actually being intentional, therefore you're purposeful, and therefore you have a mindset. So if I can teach people how to connect their intention and being intentional every day, because I see that a lot in just life. People are just hoping, they show up and they just hope things work out. No, be intentional. So connect your breath with your intention. And I think when you think about, the whole, like, hey, Grant, I'm breathing, but nothing's really changing. Really, you want me to breathe? Well, we all want to be great. We want to succeed. If you truly want to achieve greatness, it only exists in the present. You can't achieve greatness or excellence in the future, and you can't achieve it in the past. So if you really want to be great, then let's get present. Let's get where our feet are. Let's get a relationship with our breath, and let's set our intention. These are really easy, again, easy to do, easy not to do. But the more you build consistency and change that behavior, your intentionality and your presence of who you are, if you do it for a month to 2 months beyond, you will feel and see that shift. Maybe not in the first week, but you got to trust the process.
Have you seen a difference in the age groups that you coach, in the way that kind of they come to you in their kind of raw state?
So when I first started this profession, I always felt like working with youth in high school at that level, it was more of an introductory experience for them. And it was
introductory, like to life, or
to these skills.
Fair enough. Okay.
Right. And because it was, it can be a little bit different and weird and awkward, especially when you have a title of mental performance coach. A lot of these younger kids will sit there, they get caught up in the whole mental part of my title. So I have to change it to literally performance coach. But I saw it that like it was more of an opportunity for me to get them bought in. Whereas when you go to college and above, they're already bought in for the most part. They already know that's going to give them an edge, right? So I kind of went through that for the first couple of years, and I'll share something that's been happening, and it's a transformational shift that's happening within the school that I'm working with, and I have been working with for the last couple of years, and it's called Archbishop Midi High School out of San Jose. Just an incredible organization or institution, incredible sports, like one of the best in the country in most of their sports. And as I've been working with that level at that population, I was kind of going through that, this is kind of introductory. This is kind of like I'm trying to get them bought in. This year, I saw this shift with a lot of women's sports, from the freshmen in JV literally telling me, Grant, we're not going to leave the room until we breathe. Grant, we're not going to go to practice until we meditate. And I'm like, whoa. Like, for me, I don't see that a lot. A lot of this stuff is like mandated from the school or the coach or the parents. But now here are these young athletes that are like, they're thirsty for it. They're like, yes, and let's do it before we compete. And it's just like, to me, it's music to my ears. It's just, that's, if you ask me like what's the most fulfilling thing about my job, it's when an athlete, team, or a coach is bought into the work. And to me, that's buying into the work.
And you mentioned that in the beginning, like getting someone to buy in. And I was going to ask you about that. So that's really them taking personal responsibility over, the steps that you've given them to help them succeed in those scenarios. And they realize the value. And so they're committed, and they don't want to risk, right, getting out there on the court or the field without properly mentally preparing themselves.
Yeah,
that's incredible. I was curious about your take on social media, and if you had kind of a perspective on how social media has either contributed to increased, mental performance, or just performance, and even anxiety. You kind of hear different things in the news, or then you listen, on the other hand, to Gary Vee, who's, like the total different direction, right? If you know him, and marketing and all that. Where do you stand with how you view social media's impact on our mental state?
So it's one of those things. It's a good thing, and it's also a bad thing. And it just depends on what your relationship is with social media. I think with athletes, it's a great thing. You can actually gain tons of exposure. You can learn a lot of stuff. There's a lot of information from social media. So that's the good side. The bad side of social media is that an athlete can be distracted from social media in many ways. And it can also distract them in a sense where in a second, they can be exposed. They can be exposed that they're not a good player. They can be exposed of not getting a scholarship. They can be exposed in many different fronts where people are talking about their play. So it's a distraction, but it's a distraction that I have to, as a mental performance coach, have to coach athletes of saying, can you control social media? No. And so my goal is to get you to focus on the things you can control. That's where the power is. Now, as soon as you start focusing on and getting plugged into stuff that's out of your control, you're out of focus. You're out of your lane, right? So I think it depends. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. And I think, from an entrepreneur, I had great advice from my mentor, because I was kind of going through this thing when I first started my business. I'm loving social media. I'm like, man, I'm getting all these likes. I'm getting all these people like DMing me. I'm like loving this stuff, right? But I tell him, like, sometimes there's like a little bit of an emotional roller coaster ride. And he looked at me and he says, listen, if you don't actually have a good relationship with social media, it's going to be emotional warfare. And he goes, so if you believe in your content and you're very authentic with it, post it and let it go. He goes, if people want to like say good stuff, well then great. If people say bad stuff, let it go, man. He's like, because if you get plugged in, then you're getting out of focus as an entrepreneur and a mental performance coach. So it's good and bad.
Okay, very cool. So, and I'm kind of sensing a theme here of staying in your lane, and I really like that. There's kind of a funny Kevin Hart skit, one of his early works, that he talks about staying in his financial lane, when he first kind of got a little bit of fame, and that kind of flashed me back to that. But I wanted to get your opinion. So when you're talking to specifically your corporate folks, your folks who are in business, do you feel like the questions are remarkably similar to the athletes, or are there some significant differences that really alter the type of advice that you give them? Or is the advice kind of similar because it is, you are competing, right, in business,
Right.
or
No, it's pretty much the same, because when you think about performing, whether if you're performing on a field, in a pool, on a court, versus in a cubicle, in a boardroom, right, in an office, the only thing that's different is the environment itself, right? So, which is an external thing that a lot of those things are out of your control. So the things that are in control, that you have control of, are your thoughts and your emotions. And that's where the similarities are on the two different domains, the athletic domain and the workplace domain, because you're performing a role. Well, no matter what that role is, if you're a doctor, a CEO, or if you're a coach or a pitcher, what do you have to do to perform? You actually have to align your thoughts and your emotions. So when certain things come up for an athlete or versus a corporate athlete, there's a lot of similarities, a lot of things of like, hey, I get distracted easily, or there's a fear of failure, or I feel my body tightens up every time I'm like unexpectedly, shocked by I have to meet with somebody real quick. Whatever it is, like there's all these different things that are very similar, and so I find it really cool because like I spent so many years as an athlete, and I spent so many years as a corporate athlete. So I feel really comfortable going back and forth with those domains.
How do you yourself personally relax?
How do I personally relax?
Yeah.
So for me, it's there's few ways of getting relaxed for me, but it's first thing is my breath.
Okay.
I really do. I get in that breath, I feel the breath, and then my second breath is I feel my body. Because I have this thing that I say that when you have your breath, like when you're in your breath, you have your mind, and when you have your mind, you have your body. And once you get that real quick, you're locked in. Like you're the most present you are right there. So that allows me to get relaxed. But music is something. When I connect my breath to music, man, it's like I feel like I'm a filmmaker in my mind. Like I start creating love and life and joy, and it's just, and I get really relaxed, and my breath is really at ease. And so if I ever feel stressed, or if I'm pissed off, or whatever it is, man, it's breath and music is to my go-to.
Absolutely. And now I was asking because I know that so many people, whether you hear about it or personally people who are like this, people are anxious or people are stressed out. And it's not just your corporate athletes or your actual sports athletes. It's parents, right? I have 3 kids. People have kids, people have all sorts of different things that are going on in their lives that take certain energies from them and give them certain energies. And so what a lot of this, what you're saying, I feel like is so cross applicable, and I love the mental side of this. And this is why I was extremely fascinated to talk to you, because just like in sports, you could be super tall, or you could be whatever. And if you compare that to business, if you're the height in sports, right, is compared to having good speaking ability, in business, let's just say, to compare those two. If your mind isn't right, if your mind isn't clear, if you're not able to relax, if you're not able to push off anxiety, you really render yourself useless,
Totally.
And so do you think so? I guess, how do I summarize this? When you think about people applying themselves to their lives and feeling nervous, stressed, anxious, kind of all these negative things that can crowd in on someone's mind, whether they're just a parent or whether they're someone in a C-level suite or a baseball suite, right? Whatever it happens to be. Give us a couple tips that people can apply right away. You talked about breath. Is there something else that people can do to kind of center themselves and tap into that? I know you mentioned music. You said breath, music. Are there other things that you could leave the audience with?
Yeah, I feel the one thing that I teach, which is a concept that I got from Bruce Lee, actually, and I'm going to tie it in with breath. But when you were talking about all the things that we all deal with on a daily basis, we deal with, anxiety and stress and pressure, like all these things, which are not a bad thing. We just have to have a different relationship with it. But I always try to teach my clients to, when they're in adversity, when they're in a pressurized situation, is that, well, pressure is a privilege anyways. It's the way I look at it. But instead of letting that situation break you, like when I mean break, like you're a parent. How many times where your kids are like, they do something, you're like, and you get pissed, right? Okay, you just broke. So if we're really present, how do we actually bend with the situation? So if we get into any situation in an athletic, corporate, relationship, families, we break all the time every day. We're driving. Like that's a perfect example. I see people breaking all the time. Why? Let's bend with it. The more present we are, the more we have a relationship with our breath. That's how we bend. When you think about Matrix, when Neo is bending, well, that bullet, obviously, if it hits him, he's going to die. But that's the thing, that bullet represents stress, and pressure, adversity. Like when it starts coming at you and you can start to feel and see yourself break, but you don't because you get into your breath, you bend. So that's just a concept that I would love to share with your listeners, is that the more that we're aware, the more we can get into our breath, the more we can actually bend with these situations, not let them break us.
I love that. Bending, not breaking. Yeah. I totally have been in those scenarios. The kids do something, the dogs, I need to be on a podcast or I need to be on a call, and especially if you're any sort of business owner who works at home anytime, you're like on the phone and trying to do these things. But you're right. Instead of being so in the activity, but more being in your mind and, like you said, in your breath. And you used the phrase, be where your feet are.
Yeah.
Can you explain what you meant by that? Because you mentioned it a couple times.
Yeah. So being where your feet are, and it's really funny when I'm working with athletes, and sometimes I'll wear some funky shoes. So because they'll come in, they're like, "Hey, coach, those are vibrant shoes, whatever, funny shoes." And then I said, "Well, be where your feet are, because when you look down, what is holding you up in the present? It's your feet, it's your legs, it's your whole body. But when you're actually, where your feet are, there you are. That's where. So we hear that a lot, actually, I believe in high performance training and mental skills training. Be where your feet are. Be right now. Right. So they have this thing called the one mindset. It's only now exist. Okay. So it's kind of the same thing of being like right here. Be where your feet are. And I do this thing where I say, mind your feet. Get in your mind to understand where your feet are so you can be fully present. So that's kind of, it's just being fully present in the here and now.
Awesome. We're heading towards wrapping up here, but I wanted to ask you any resources that you would recommend if people are really fascinated by this, or just kind of, whether it is athletically or just personally in their lives, want to up their mental game. Are there resources, podcasts, books that you would recommend, other than your own, of course?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. That's what I love about, when you're talking about social media and and just technology. There's so much out there. There's the 10 ways of this and the 5 ways of that. If you follow them, they'll work. It's just buying into it. But
and actually, let me just interrupt you really quick here. I did want to ask you something about have you ever had any sort of interaction with any sort of wearable technology? There's like a Muse headset for meditation. I know there's like a Halo Sport device that it's supposed to help you learn faster. There's different things I think that are starting to come out as people understand the power that their mind has to just create small or massive differences in their lives. Have you used any of those, or would you recommend looking into any of those for anyone, or are those more gimmicky in your opinion?
No, I think the technology is there. I think, so I haven't done any of the wearables yet. I think there's some really interesting different things that are happening around mental performance. So I would encourage people, why not try it? I mean, obviously, I don't, again, don't hurt yourself. I'm sure you're not going to, but that stuff interests me too. And if I have an opportunity to check out some wearables, I would, because why not? There was I haven't used it, but there's a sock actually. I think it's called HP Vox, VOXX. Okay. And it literally, when you put it on your feet, these socks, it has this technology in it, and it activates your brain. And what it does is not only does that make you jump like a half an inch more and run like a 40-yard dash like a half a second faster, it does stuff to your blood flow, and it's just crazy. So I'm sitting there going, this is amazing technology. And I talked to a gentleman that represented the product, but then I'm like, well, how is that fair if someone is actually using that, during a performance, or a competition? But again, there's ethics on that side. But I haven't had a chance to wear them per se, but I know that technology is pretty cool. My mentor, Graham Betchart, has made some music. He calls it mindset music. And I think this has been around for a long time, actually has been, but it's called dual encoding. And when dual encoding is basically when you're taking a process of learning and you're actually supporting it with music. So when you take those two together, it's called dual encoding. So a lot of people learn
dual encoding.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just writing that down. I got to remember it.
Yeah, and he's got Graham Betchart has a album on iTunes. It's called Unlocked, and it's him. Literally, it's spoken word, and it's all about mental skills training, and it's super motivating. But it's cool music, and so it's tapping into a lot of different senses and allowing you to learn at the same time.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you. I was curious about that because in this space, I know people are starting to get more. I know, like you see on Instagram, I think maybe I looked into one of these things. So Instagram started feeding me a bunch of them. But there's like a sleep mask, a special sleep mask that completely, made everything way darker. But then it also had music, so you'd listen to, different meditation sounds or something, and it was supposed to help you get to sleep quicker and go into a deeper sleep faster. Right. And so anyway, curious about that. But yeah, so resources, you just said kind of look at some of those things online. Yeah. Any accounts specifically you'd follow, or
I'll plug a company that I'm starting to do some work with my mentor. It's called Train the Mind, trainthemind.com. It's essentially, it's kind of like Peloton for mental skills trainers. So if you want to go on and check out, you want to go into a mental skills class with a mentor, then you'll just go in and find out, when they're teaching that class, or go into the library of all the classes they've done, and you don't have to really wait for a class. But it has kind of a Peloton structure to it. But as far as the books, I would say I just got done reading The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, and that to me is like this just do everything consistently, small amounts every day for a long time, and you'll get to where you want. So that's great. And then I think there's the one that I go to for my podcast is Michael Gervais. I think he's the dude. I mean, he knows how to do it and knows how to interview people and get the information for us to learn. So,
what was his name?
Michael Gervais. It's called
Michael
Finding
Gervais.
Mastery. Yeah, Finding Mastery.
Finding Mastery. I love it. Okay, I'm gonna have to check it out. All right. Well, Grant, thank you so much for letting me ask you all these questions
Yeah.
and learn a little bit more about what you do. Where can people find you?
Okay, you can find me in a lot of places. My website is gamefaceperformance.com. You can actually find me on Instagram and Twitter on the handle of GFP Mindset. So it stands for Game Face Performance. So GFP Mindset. You can find me at Facebook at Gameface Performance, LinkedIn under my name Grant. If you want to check out my podcast, 90% Mental, you can find that on any podcast platform, but you can find it at gamefaceperformance.com. And my book, The Next One Up Mindset, you can buy it on my website or on Amazon.
Amazing. And I'm gonna have to check that out. I haven't checked it out yet, but I will be buying it from Amazon.
Awesome.
So awesome. Grant, thank you. I really appreciate your time sharing us with these. I'm definitely going to stay in my lane and really focus on some of those breath things. And thank you for sharing your expertise and wisdom here with us today.
Beautiful, man. I appreciate it. It was great.
Awesome. All right. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
You too.